of the offices in State House called the Presidential CEO Forum. They're the ones who called the meeting. So we went with a number of people. So on our side, there was myself, Mzee Chizito, I think his company is called Zinunula. There was Mzee Kawoya and his son, and Haji Lukenge Ishak. We were also accompanied by Consolata Tumwesije, Susan Achebet, and Robert Biarohanga. So that is the group from our side that was able to attend. Other people were invited, but they had gone to the UK. Most of the people had gone to the UK for, I think there was an expo. Those of us for whom climbing an aeroplane is now a rumor, we were around. So just boarded a vehicle and we went to Entebbe. We had lunch, and we represented you ably in the consumption of that lunch. There was no, you shouldn't regret that. So on that front, we did a good job. So the government side had many people, and I cannot speak for them now. In the discussions that followed, a secretariat was created for that discussion. And the person present here today is Sarah from State House. She's there. She's the one who is. So she took notes from the other side, and then her job is to take notes and prepare a document, but I will get to that. So very quickly, I'll tell you what transpired. So the president came in, and he was carrying a military jacket. Me, I was sitting in front, and he said that he had come to wrestle us, especially the slave traders. I don't need to tell you who the slave traders are. I pleaded that wrestling us and sitting in our chest does not help us because we needed a conversation. After a long conversation, we sang Amazing Grace. I was baptized William Wilberforce as an abolitionist, and I was given a role which up to today, I don't know whether it comes with any benefits, but it certainly comes with a lot of headaches. So I was called coordinator because I refused chairmanship. I'll speak what I think and what I feel. And those of you who know me, you know me about coffee simply because of the ability to make more noise than you. There isn't any other reason why you know me. It's not for excellence or farming or volumes or anything. It is because I suspect amongst all of you farmers of coffee, I am probably the one who speaks the best English. And we can go on a contest for that one. Even Ian Clark, who is shaking his head, is Irish. I speak better English than you, Ian, so there's no way. But anyway, when I was there, I felt that that was a really powerful opportunity for us to resolve a number of issues that were tearing us apart. And so the president said, asked after we went back and forth. Actually, the person who saved the day is Consolata. I don't know if she's here. Consolata and Chebet, yes. Those are the ones who took out the anger. Otherwise, we were finished. But when they spoke, the president then said, okay, how do we move together? So he explained in his long explanation, I understood two things which I'll present to you. His interests are two. Number one, how can this farmer, and in his mind, he was thinking more of the smallholder farmer, but he's saying, how can the farmer get more money from this coffee? That was his first question, which he wanted us to answer. Number two, in an industry of $562 billion across the world, the producing countries are getting only 25 billion, and Uganda is getting only 800 million. What does Uganda need to do to play in the segment that gets us more money? So those were the basic strategic questions he wants to answer. Now, in his mind, one of the basic things that he's talking about is processing. because we can talk many things about value addition, but in his mind he's talking about processing from bean to final consumer product. That's what is in his mind. Of course, as you know, there was an elephant in the room. The good thing, when Consolata spoke, the president also recognized that people who come from my part of the country, we speak freely and in a straightforward manner. So the other elephant in the room on that day, which we didn't tackle properly, was the VINCI agreement and how that would affect the rest of the coffee sector. And you know those arguments. So those were the two big issues. So on our part, you know that we used to have arguments. We had arguments earlier this year and we wound up in Parliament. Part of that process involved a lot of informal consultations because we didn't want Yamuremye to know that we are consulting to oppose. So we were operating like guerrillas. You call somebody on one phone, then you call on another. Then you say, let us meet. Then they say, but we have seen Yamuremye's car. No, let's go here. That's how we developed the position we went with to Parliament. Now, when we heard the president saying at the State of the Nation, when he said, I will call the farmers and talk to them, we knew that we would be called at short notice without preparation. So immediately we held another meeting again in a guerrilla fashion with some stakeholders, and they know themselves. We shall only disclose them when we're giving out medals after value addition. But we sat in a meeting and said, if we were called, what would we present? And that process of consultation went on, and some people, different groups were consulted, and a document somehow was developed. Luckily enough, that document was ready by the time we were called to go to Entebbe. So we had the basis on which to explain. So when the president asked us, what are your issues? We raised about 5 points. Number one is productivity of farmers. What investment can be made in increasing productivity of farmers? And one of the models that came up for discussion is a model that was presented by Consolata. And she's there. Consolata, you stand up, because I don't want people to think I went alone. You stand up. That is Consolata. Message, people might think I went there alone. I had a big delegation. So Consolata has something called each tree counts. So that model was presented as a possible model that can be studied, funded, and replicated across the country. Then Achebet from Sebei. Consolata is from my village, she's my sister-in-law. So Consolata is from Kanu, where she's my sister-in-law. Achebet, we're neighbors. I'm from Manafa, she's from Kapchorwa. Kwen. Achebet described to the president the process of how smallholder farmers can be assisted to develop and participate in specialty. And with that, we made that point. We said productivity is one of the surest ways you can put money in the pockets of farmers because it increases yield, it increases quality. So that was issue number one. Issue number two, we said value addition. And the question was, how can locals, us, those who seated here, even Clark is now a local because we have localized him. How can we participate in that value addition process so that we also capture some of that value? Then a discussion came up about soluble plants. And one of the things was that there were two benefits. Undergrades, I don't want to go into all of that stuff, but basically there were two benefits. So there is a discussion, do we get one, do we get two? Because already there is an investor who is ready, and you know who it is, to implement immediately the one of. But then as the MD said, in NDP3, I think there are 2 or 3, so they can look at. So the question was, how do we participate in that one? Number 3 was the important question of marketing and sales. What's the level of investment that the state can put in the marketing and promotion of Ugandan coffee? Number 4, research and development. One, the issue of making sure that we have resilient inputs. Two, and climate resilient inputs. Two, how can knowledge be transferred from where it is being researched so that it can be used by farmers. And then overall, we need to start to think about upgrading Nakori to an institute of coffee studies that looks beyond just the science of coffee and go into the complex issues of how we do coffee business. Because we don't know, many of us don't know the complexities of coffee, how it is traded, sold, volatility, hedging. Some of you, when you're talking futures, yesterday's, recent, we don't know what you're talking about. We're just stuck. We don't even know how these prices. Andreas here talks about New York, London, what, me, I'm lost. And yet I'm very educated. So imagine the guys who are not educated. So if we had an institute where, like oil in there, Chichwamba, is it where? Chigumba. They study everything on oil. For us, the only people who are studying on coffee are the scientists. You don't hear of an accountant qualified in coffee matters. So we need to think along those lines. How can that investment be made? Then the fourth point was, so I've made how many? Four. Fifth, yes. Fifth was financing. How do we de-risk volatility of prices? And how can we also de-risk or reduce financing costs for us? That was the issue. Then the last point, which now comes in a subsequent meeting, was the question of regulation. If you are taking UCDA to agriculture, what next now? Is there a new kind of structure? What is going to happen now? Because normally when you have that vacuum, there can be a bit of confusion. So those are the issues we put on the table. Now, informally, when we were discussing with some of the officials who now became the parties on the other side, there was the question of the agreement. And we pointed out that that agreement had 3 points, at least minimum 3 points, that were contradictory to the coffee sector. Number one, the guaranteeing of supply of crop, which people have baptized monopoly. So that was a big issue for us, which needed to be revisited. Number two was the question of Screen 18. I think those two are together. Then there was the question of, if you are incentivized the way UVCC is incentivized, should you also be participating in export? Because you are competing with people who have to pay taxes, who have to do all sorts of things, but for you don't have to pay taxes. Then there was the question of, if you are getting all these incentives, why is it not there in the agreement? How you transfer the benefit of that to the prices that you give farmers, and so on. So at the end, the president then said, okay, William Wilberforce, being me, I don't know how many of you know William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was a slave trader who converted and became an abolitionist. So that's how I became William Wilberforce. So then William Wilberforce, how do you now proceed? How do we work together? So we requested that a team be put together on the government side. We used the document we had submitted as a primary document of discussion. We meet with them, see what we agree on, what can be done short-term, what are long-term issues, and then we now use that as a journey of moving together, so we stop arguing. So, but I also ask that we be allowed to come and consult with the sector. Now, I don't know how many of you have been involved in mobilization, but those of us who used to be involved in mobilization, especially from Western Uganda, there was something called Nyekundire, volunteers. So when we went, we were just volunteers, trying to see what can be done. Now, I personally feel that as a volunteer, you are somehow an imposter. So I had imposed myself on you, and I'm purporting and pretending to be speaking for you. Now, you can't deny me because I've already been there. Now, when I reached there, I got an office, which is coordinator. Now you have no choice. Anyway, so the point was, can we now meet properly, not in the other guerrilla fashion of dodging and hiding and using coded language? and contribute points to those issues that we have raised. Develop a draft document in whatever form. Send it to the Attorney General. Let the Attorney General convene his side. We meet and then go back to the President and say, Mzee, you sent us. This is what we discussed. Yes. This here we agree. This we don't agree. This we can do immediately. This can't be done. After that, he guides. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my limited, very limited task. I request, Bwana MD, because after that we had subsequent 2 meetings. I request that one of the outcomes of this meeting here is that, actually 2 outcomes. One, Sarah is here, she's recording. Provide some time for people to speak out on what they want included in that document. Number 2, the different sector players who are here, barristers, roasters, toasters, I don't know what other stars are there, all the stars, farm stars, I'm sure there are no fraudsters. So, all the stars who are here, we get at least a minimum of 1 or 2 people for each part or sector, whether it's cooperatives, roasters, barristers, so that we know that when we go to the meeting with the Attorney General, and when they call another meeting for State House, you are all represented, so you're not hearing rumors from me. Don't say R.KABUSHENGA went there and spoke for us. I have carried many headaches in my life. This one I don't want to carry. So I am requesting, Bwana MD, that the associations or groups that are 2 people, when the meeting with AG, I can, because I have better English than you, I can speak with AG and we are hunger. But when we go, we had better all be one face, saying we met in a small group in an office, we met at a coffee city, we met under the auspices of UCDA, we are the ones now. So we are here now. What we are telling you is it. Then whatever happens after that, you cannot accuse R.KABUSHENGA of having done what? Usurped or run away with it. What you do with yourselves after that, frankly, Bwana MD, I don't care. But I will have delivered my obligation, and at that point, my job as coordinator will have ended. I think Samson, I think I have clarified. If there's anybody who hasn't understood English, it's really not my fault. When they were teaching, I don't know why you didn't go to school, but for us we went. Bwana MD, thank you very much for the meeting and for inviting us, because when you offered, we accepted, we are now here. I believe strongly and fervently that even if the process has had its friction, even if we've had bitter disagreements, ultimately let's remember one thing: the 12 million people that are dependent on the decisions that are made about coffee. Those are the only people that matter. The rest of us are simply their representatives, and in my case, I am just simply your spokesperson. Thank you.